Hi, and welcome to the Entreprenurse Podcast, an unfiltered discussion related to health and healthcare. My name is Amy.
And my name is Sarah.
And we are your podcast hosts. So thank you so much for joining us week to week. We have such a great episode. And I think this is so timely because many nurses are thinking about, changing the profession, leaving, and actually venturing to entrepreneurship. So before I get started, I'm going to hand it over to Sarah to tell you who our guest is today.
I am so excited to have this guest. We've been, following each other for years, I want to say, and we have so much in common. So I'm going to introduce Janine Kelbach. She has a BSN and RNC-OB. She's a wife, a mom. She's got 2 boys and a Great Dane. And she's educator and author of the book Entreprenurse. 30 plus nurses turn into business owners and share their secrets to success. She's been a freelance health content writer since 2013 and is the CEO of Right RN. She hosts the Savvy Scribe Podcast and owns SavvyNurseWriter.com. Her team of healthcare writers, RN writers, help healthcare companies with their content and social needs. So glad to have you here, Janine. And I feel like we have a lot in common being podcasters, nurses, moms, labor and delivery nurses. So thank you for coming on today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
It's great to have you. And I was just wondering if you could tell us a little bit more about yourself and your background, your clinical background in nursing.
Sure. So I started nursing back in 2006 in Cleveland, Ohio, here where I live, born, raised. And I had started actually as an aide 4 years prior on labor and delivery unit. Knew I wanted to do labor and delivery, but you got to do the whole nursing school and everything in between. But I still knew I wanted to do labor and delivery. And when I graduated, I knew I needed the tertiary experience. I was at a community hospital, did the tertiary experience, did the night shift, quickly went to charge nurse. I even did some other babies for a little while, some NICU there, and quickly was then promoted to the community hospital. They wanted me, I was still PRN there, so they wanted me back as nurse assistant manager for nights. So I did that, went back, and then I was totally like preceptor role and assistant nurse manager, and then finally got day shift after 10 years. And on day shift is when I was just charge nurse all the time, preceptor, all the things. And then I went into the educator role after quite some time. But I think in all of that, and I got my certification, I advanced my degree, but I still just did not feel fulfilled. I wasn't unhappy. I just wasn't fulfilled. And I knew a new nursing job wasn't going to be what was going to help me, but it was that's how I kind of explored. I mean, I kind of did everything, and I realized I had these soft skills that a lot of nurses don't even talk about because we don't even understand that we already have so many qualities beyond a nurse. And I think that's kind of what lit my brain. I'm like, wait, I can do this. I can do that. And I think a lot of entrepreneurs do the same thing.
Yeah, I mean, I feel the same way. And I think this is actually, it's kind of a great segue because, even myself and Sarah have actually journeyed into entrepreneurship, and we never really thought that we'd be able to see ourselves there because I think a lot of nurses don't feel that they can move from, the bedside. It's kind of like a one and done. Once you've become a nurse, you've graduated, that's it. Your life is, destined to be at the bedside. And again, I would say that there's nothing wrong with being at the bedside. I think that's an excellent place to be as well. We need nurses to be there. But this whole added piece of kind of not feeling fulfilled. And I think that's something myself and Sarah both felt as well, where we're just like, we need a little bit more and we wanted to venture out. So that's really excellent that you had the opportunity to do that.
Yeah.
It's been
add
fun.
on to that, I think that I couldn't articulate what I wasn't feeling fulfilled about because I never realized that nurses could be entrepreneurs. I had no role models of anyone who'd actually ventured into entrepreneurship. To be honest, I think a lot of nurses do sort of MLM type selling stuff. That was the only example I had of entrepreneurship. I definitely didn't want to be selling essential oils.
No,
no
essential oils.
Don't want to be selling yoga wear. That just wasn't my thing. And it wasn't until I just went for it that I realized that it could actually be a viable option.
Yeah. Do you want to self-plug yourself, Sarah, a little bit?
Okay.
What do you do, Sarah? Why don't you tell myself and Janine?
Okay. Well,
Yes.
as you know, I wear many different hats. So one of the hats I wear outside of the Greatness podcast is I am a resume writer. I'm a career coach. I help nurses with all things career related. So anything from job interviews to cover letters, resumes, LinkedIn profiles. I'm also helping nurses get into entrepreneurship. So I kind of do all the things. And in a way, I feel like nurses are my patients, and I hear back from them when they let me know they've landed their dream jobs. And that just makes me so happy. And I, um, I think without having started the podcast and getting that exposure and knowing that I could do something outside of clinical nursing, I would never would have ventured into this other business.
Yeah, no, I think that's amazing. I think this is kind of what we all need to do. It's kind of finding yourself, finding who your person is. And even before I kind of talk about finding myself and my person, I think it's kind of good back to jump back to you, Janine, and maybe tell us about why do you think that many nurses are shifting their focus from bedside to the boardroom, and what made you actually decide to become a nurse entrepreneur?
I love this question because I always go with there's three
All right,
F's.
let's
It's not what you're thinking.
because
It's not what
nurses
you're
have
thinking.
lots of F's to say right now.
Yes, it's not any of what you're thinking. The first one is, well, they're not in any particular order. And what I notice is that what I'm about to say switches depending on the season of life you're in. So there's three reasons that I find: flexibility, financial, and family.
Absolutely.
And it doesn't matter which one of the three. It's usually one of those three, though, and it switches over time. You might initially go into entrepreneurship for a boost of income, right? You were like, financially, we know we're not going to be rich as nurses, so there's usually just something we need some extra fun money or whatever, pay kids soccer, tuition, whatever, and that's usually the first thing, because I think a lot of them they're just desperate to find just extra money without burning themselves out at the bedside. So that's the first F. Um and initially for me, that was what I was doing as well. I was working, anyone pick up extra? I'll pick up extra. I'll pick up extra. And then you realize you go to work, and you guys know we should not be unhappy about delivering someone's child.
Yeah.
So when I went to work dreading going, I was like, why am I dreading this? This is like the best place to work. Like, this is someone's biggest day of their life. And here I am annoyed I'm going in. Like, this is a problem. Didn't used to be annoyed. So then, between that and then the flexibility, that's another thing. That's the second F that I noticed, that we are craving, like you guys said, the work-life balance of other people. And honestly, because I did the nurse aide before the nursing job, and then before that I was so young, I was working like fast food jobs. So like my work ethic was always really, really good, and I always thought that that's how
Right.
everybody was. And when you start nursing and you realize it's 12-hour shifts, 14-hour shifts, 16-hour shifts, sometimes 18-hour shifts, you're not upset about it, because you're just think that that's what's normal. You work night shift, get 3 hours of sleep, and all your friends at work only got 3 hours of sleep before they went in that night. So it's okay. And everybody wakes you up because they don't realize that a night shift person sleeps during the day. But 3 o'clock p.m., that should be just fine. But they don't realize that's a 3 in the
Right. Yeah.
morning for them. Like, all those kind of things we take for granted when you're in the nursing world, because you just don't know any different. Everyone around you have exhausted doctors, all the things. So until I was full time at home as an entrepreneur, even though my husband worked 9 to 5 bank hours our whole time we've been together, I didn't see it in him. You only see it in yourself. Then you realize, I don't need to just keep working and working and working and working to make myself look any better or anything. That people actually do rest, and that's a normal thing. Like, the flexibility is incredible of normal people's lives. And then the third thing is family, right? I think we want that flexibility to not only have family around, to have friends around, to have that social interaction that we crave as nurses when we're working Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and the whole family just got together without us again. So those three things is what I really noticed pushed me into entrepreneurship, and a lot of other nurses that I've seen in the space into that
Yeah,
as
I mean,
well.
those are the same reasons I got into entrepreneurship myself, because and it's kind of crazy. I didn't even think about them as being like the three F's. And the reason I got into entrepreneurship was, one, family. So like I have children with disabilities, and I just felt that I needed to be home more. And it really didn't work very well for me to be at the bedside. They just needed much more of my attention. And then the other piece, I would say financials was a small piece, but the other part was, just the flexibility. Nurses tend to not have very flexible schedules. You're either on your day, night, so you're four on, five off, or they have like the traditional line where it's like twos and threes where it's crazy.
Mhm.
And there was a couple nurses that were non-union that I remember actually having being able to, I think there was like not a lottery, but it was like a system. I think it was like a
Oh, self-scheduling or something?
self-scheduling. So
Yeah.
it offered a little bit more flexibility. But again, I felt that I needed more. So, again, with, moving into a more entrepreneurship role, I decided to, advocate more, talk about the things that really matter to me, whether it was, health equity, whether it was seeing better patient healthcare outcomes. Talking about anti-racism, I think that was another piece. We never talked about racism as a social determinant of health in nursing, and I thought to myself that this is something I really wanted to do. And it really kind of took on a life of its own, and I've been able to have many conversations at colleges, universities, with various different professional associations about these various different things, and been able to actually spread that into radio and television. And I think that's so important, that we don't see ourselves in these roles, we don't see ourselves as nurses to
Mhm.
be in these spaces, but it's so important for us to be there and take up the space, that I'm just so happy that I had the opportunity to do this and to continue to lift my voice and share stories.
And I think it's important also to talk about the fact that a lot of nurses feel like they need permission to start a
Oh,
business.
yes.
Like, I don't know what it is, if it's just ingrained to us in the culture of nursing that we are so silenced, we are so beaten down, we're so burnt out that we feel like we need to ask permission to do anything. And I can
Mhm.
tell you, I didn't ask permission to do this. I didn't go to the board of nursing to ask them. And this is actually a post that came up that I saw today. A fellow nurse entrepreneur actually put out a post to say, you don't need to ask the board of nursing for permission to start a business. Obviously, you're going to practice within your scope if it's with direct patient care, but you need permission from yourself.
Right. I
You might
agree.
need to ask your spouse. Maybe you need to have a conversation with your spouse, obviously. This is
Yes.
a big decision.
That is a part of it. Yes. Okay.
But you don't need to ask permission. You need to just get started. So I think that is something that not everyone realizes. And,
Mhm.
one of the things I also love about being an entrepreneur is now when people ask me what I do, I can tell them I'm a nurse and I'm an entrepreneur, and just sort of educate them as to all the things nurses can do. And I'm curious, Janine, if you could talk about what exactly it is you do, because I don't think everybody understands what healthcare writing is.
Yeah, I want to tag on your point really quick though, Sarah, about that permission thing. A lot of times in the area that I'm in, freelance writing, I'll get into it. A lot of nurses ask me, "Well, do I have to ask my employer
Oh,
if
yeah.
I can write this? Am I going to get sued over this?" And it's like, whoa, whoa, whoa. We are so ingrained in that too, especially labor and delivery. Oh, you're going to be sued. You're going to be sued.
Litigation.
It's like
Girl.
you don't. As long as you're staying again within your scope, you're providing that evidence-based research, like, you're not gonna get
Right.
sued. Like, the people that should get sued is the misinformation out there, and even they are
Right.
getting
People
sued.
are number one afraid they're going to lose their job and that they're going to lose their license. Those are the two
Yes.
biggest things I hear about anything.
Yeah. It stops
Um,
people from doing
right,
what they
and
want
then
to
you
do.
hear about that one nurse like 10 years ago who something bad happened to him or her, but is that something, do we know the whole story? Is this something that more to it, right? So I
Right.
think people need to really unpack why they're afraid of losing their job or their license, or why they think they need to ask their employer for permission for something that has nothing to do with their bedside job. I mean,
Hmm.
it's really not here or there.
Yeah.
And we talked about those 3 Fs, and, like, the financial one usually is, like, a smaller portion of it, because I think to be fulfilled as an entrepreneur, I don't think it's just a nurse thing, I think it's a human thing, where we need to feel like we're helping someone. So if you're going out there just to make money, we talked about those MLM companies, like your local Pampered Chef consultant over here. Like,
It's all
I
good.
tried that. I like the I like the product. Like, it's not that I didn't like the product, but I didn't wanna sell it all the time, but I wanted extra money. So when you just want the extra money, your heart
Right.
isn't in it. And especially as nurses, I said like human too, but I feel like as nurses even more, we have to go, what can I do as an entrepreneur that I can still help people? Because that was a big thing when I went into this. I'm like, well, how am I going to have that impact that I've had over the years on people at the bedside? And now it's like, not only do I help people with content writing, like patients, consumers, healthcare professionals with what they're reading. But now I help nurses do the same thing. So I'm still helping people. It's just a different way. And so that's what I'm in. I'm in content writing, and I help other nurses start their own freelance writing businesses. And then we like talk about this skill of writing and how it's like, when you first started IVs, you really sucked at it, and then somebody told you to do this or do that, and then you did it over time, you tweaked things, and then it just got better because
Right.
it's a skill. We do need degrees to be nurses, but you don't need another degree to go be an entrepreneur and do something. That's another like myth you always hear is like, what do I need to go back to school for? Because that's ingrained in
Right.
us too. Just keep going back to school, go into debt. You're not going to get any more money when you get out, but just keep getting it because that's what we want nurses to do. And it's a shame because a lot of people go to school just because they want to go to school. There's no like end goal except another letter after
Yeah,
their
and you
name.
touched on another really important part, the kind of like the financial piece. And I think that, with inflation, rising costs, nurses really want to move into entrepreneurship. But again, our pay relatively is the same over this long period of time. So, what did you find was your biggest challenge, or what do you think the biggest challenge right now would be to moving towards entrepreneurship?
I think you need to think of an area, especially if you're just starting out, like online services is where I think everybody should go. Unless you want to open some brick and mortar something, online businesses are the cheapest to start. And as an entrepreneur, you can go as high as you want
Right.
with income if you provide some sort of service. So I feel like that is where a lot of people should start if they're just looking to see if they want to do entrepreneurship and they don't want to go take out a big small
Right.
business loan
Right.
or something like that because they probably already have student loan
Yes.
debt.
That's fair. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a really great thing to mention because maybe nurses feel like in order to be an entrepreneur, it has to be a physical item that they're selling.
Right.
But I can't
Hmm.
speak for yourself, but for me, there's very little overhead cost, like month to month, for me to run my resume business. And I think that's where we need to be, like taking little steps and seeing if it's going to work or not, rather than investing a ton of money up front in something that may not pan out. And with online, I think it's really easy to pivot to what you offer.
Yeah, no, I think that's
Oh,
yeah, and
for
again,
sure.
with the services that I provide, I'm a speaker, so I'm a speaker for the National Speaking Bureau. And again, it's really just having those conversations. And I think it's just such a space that nurses need to be in. There's not very many nurses who are speakers or national speakers, and it's such an important place. And I think that's that element of storytelling, that element of connecting with people is hugely important. And I think it's not just a service, it's something that I just love to do. I love to have these conversations and advocate. So, I mean, I think there's lots of great things that nurses can take away. Other people that are listening, you don't have to be a nurse if you want to be an entrepreneur. And I think that there's so many pearls of value that people can take from this conversation that we hope that people will start and see what they might be able be interested in getting into.
Yeah, and I think that one of the things I want to talk about are just some valuable lessons we learned
Mhm.
along the way. So, for example, when we first started this podcast, our first episode was god awful. It was awful.
How do
Amy,
we turn this thing off?
no, I'm not just that. Amy was sick. She sounded like a frog. We
That was
hadn't
my sexy
really.
voice. What are you talking?
You sound. You sounded like a character from somewhere. I can't think of right now. And like, and I didn't realize this, Janine, until after we had put the episode out. It had been a couple months. And I realized that I didn't know how to stop the recording. But not only that, we didn't cut that part out. That is in our.
And we left it there. We're not editing it out because it's not about perfection, right?
It's proof that we can only go up. So
Right. I
so
agree.
I would
Yeah.
love if you have any lessons that you can share with our listeners about things you've learned along the way.
I think one of the like myths you see out there is that this is going to be a quick
Right.
and easy thing, and it's not. And it's just like anything. Like the people that put in the most practice at something are going to become the best at it. But sometimes we only see the best, and then we don't see the years of practice behind it. And a lot of us go into this thinking, "Oh, okay. Well, she did it. Like I just got to do what she did, and then it'll be fine." And it takes a long time to perfect things, to get followers, to find people to engage with, and but one thing that is always true is that if you have consistency in whatever you're doing, you will get
Yes.
results. You just have to be consistent with it. Doesn't matter anything in life. Entrepreneurship is just one of those things. And you have to be just, self-motivated. It's hard. It's hard to in Cleveland, Ohio, where I am, like it's snowy, it's cold, it's gray in the early mornings. But if I don't get up in the early mornings, I'm not getting nearly as much as I can get done in one day done. And of course, there's those days just like at the bedside, you're just not as peppy, you're exhausted, but it's different. Like it's worth it if you just keep going with it. And along the way, those are some things, and to not trust everyone out there, because that's also something too. A lot of people go into this like us that want to help people, but there are a lot of
Mm.
scams out there, and especially if you can't read through it, or always run it past other people, because you never know who's trying to take your money or whatever. And other things along the way, I think too, especially being a remote worker now, I think it's really important for people to put on their calendars social events, lunches with friends, so that you don't miss out on your coworkers all the time if you go part-time or if you eventually leave the bedside. So that's something I do like every month. Every month I'm like, who do I want to hang out with this month? And I'm like, hey Nancy, what are you doing this week? And she's like, oh my God, so great to hear from you. I'm open on Wednesday. And what's so cool about my job, I can make
Right.
Wednesday
Yeah.
happen. So that's what's so cool. Like when I had a dentist appointment last week, I didn't have to look at my schedule ahead of time. I just went, okay, dentist, okay, cool. I don't have a meeting that day. Like other than that, I can move things around. If I got to get up earlier, I can. If I can stay up later that day, whatever. So that's the beauty of it too. It's just, but you have to make those things happen. You have to schedule your time, and it takes time to figure out your new life like this. And a lot of my friends are like, I don't know how you sit at a desk all day. And I'm like, I
Don't.
don't. I'm getting some laundry done. I, like, there's not a lot of sitting at my desk, because that's when I'm sitting at my desk is when I'm writing, and that's my like space where I really need to think. So a lot of my tasks and stuff, I can be remote around my house. I have a treadmill I walk on and work on. Like it's not, and my brain is constantly going. It's not like I'm sitting there watching like a continuing education video or something all day. Like it's not like a
Oh,
conference, or
LMSs all
it's
day
definitely
long.
your brain's always going.
Those LMSs, right?
Oh, that's so good. Yeah. I think
Ugh,
one thing I
like where's the fast forward? Oh, they blocked it.
Right? That's the worst when we find that out. It's like, why can't we? You have to
Worst.
let it play out. It's like 40 minutes long.
I know, and like I used to create LMSs, and we would put that in on purpose, and I feel bad, but because we
Yeah,
nurses would just
yeah.
play.
But you knew they were gonna go
Oh,
through
you're
it.
gonna
Yeah.
get a perk, aren't you? Well, we're gonna make sure that you actually watch it, and put the questions in a different order if you were to redo it, kind of make sure you pay
Yeah.
attention. I get all of that, and one thing that I think I've learned along the way is that you don't have to make things perfect before you just put yourself out there, because I hear from a lot of nurses that want to get into entrepreneurship, like, I just don't feel ready. Like I need to perfect this before I put it out. And I'm
Mhm.
like, I think you just need to put it out and see what happens, and you can refine it as you
Hmm.
go. So it's just one of those things. Like, even I help a lot of nurses with their LinkedIn profiles, and people tell me, I don't want it, it's not ready yet, so I don't want to like connect with anyone. I'm like, what do you mean it's not ready yet? Just like start adding people, look at their profile, see what they do, and put your own spin onto it. Like, it doesn't have to be perfect. I think if you're waiting for perfection, then you're just gonna be waiting for years.
Yeah.
And like, I have a friend
Absolutely.
actually who talked about starting a podcast actually before we started
Oh,
our
did
podcast.
she start?
No, she hasn't started. She's been doing it
She
for
still doesn't
3
Perfection
start.
is
years
the
Yeah.
now.
enemy of the good.
So I think, like, yes, you want to do a good job at some point. You just need to get started. And I think there's only two times to start a business. There's hard times and there's harder times. So you just have to pick.
Jeez,
Just have to pick.
Sarah.
Well, we started this podcast
That's
and my
true.
business like basically during the pandemic. I'm sure that wasn't optimal timing,
Right,
but
right.
we
That's
had to
fair.
pick a time to start at least.
Yeah. And I think I
Yeah. And sometimes when you start,
right.
that's all you need, right? It's just that boost to keep going. It's like having children or getting married or moving. There's no good time. And even when, if you wanted to move in the middle of June and it's sunny and beautiful, that's the day it'll rain. Like that's what happens. That's life. And you're totally right that if perfection can't hold you back. And I feel like TikTok might have been the only platform to date that has shown us you don't have to
That's
be
true.
perfect to do anything. You don't need your makeup on. You don't need to just be real. And people appreciate that. I think a lot of those influencers and stuff out there that are like all done up and everything looks perfect, their day-to-day life looks perfect. Those are the people that then we like put ourselves down over because we think we're just not good or normal, and that's not the normal. The normal is no makeup, crazy household, floors are dirty, it happens. Like this is life. And I think the same thing, like just get yourself out there and don't be afraid. This is something too. This is something I notice a lot. Nurses are afraid of what their coworkers are going to see them
Right.
doing or their bosses or like, well, I don't know. I don't want my boss to see that I'm a writer. Well, if she's a good boss, she's not going to care. She's going to encourage you to keep going. And if she's a bad boss and she doesn't want you doing it, you need to really ask
Mhm.
why. Like that makes no sense. But it's more of like a not just perfection, like they just don't want to be seen as like not a nurse anymore. And it's a real fear. It's a
Yeah,
total
and I think
fear.
to add on all of your points, I think the one word that we haven't said, and I think this rings really true to me in terms of my own entrepreneurship journey, is vulnerability. You have to be able to be
Yes.
vulnerable to be in this space to do this type of work. And I think that, with myself and Sarah starting a podcast, with us talking about our mental health struggles, and then just really my entrepreneurship is sharing my voice, sharing my experiences, sharing the things that mean really so much to us that we don't talk about, all that underlying stuff that we really need to bubble and bring up to the surface, and that is vulnerability. And I think that also is crucial to entrepreneurship. You have to be able to say, okay, I'm going to take this little risk and I'm going to do something a little different, and then see those changes and see those results. And I think that showing your vulnerability is actually a strength. I would say that that's what makes us gritty nurses. That's what makes other nurses have grit out there as well, to show that vulnerability. So I think with all of those different things combined, entrepreneurship as a nurse is a great tool and a different thing that you can also try. And I think a lot of nurses should take that aspect to be vulnerable and to try something different and new.
For sure, for sure. And I think too with being vulnerable, it puts you out there to be
Mm,
humble. It puts you out there. Like if you're not the dumbest person in the room, you're not in the
right.
right room. If you feel like you know everything, get out of the room. You're not learning, you're not going to grow. And I feel like too when I was a bedside nurse, I didn't feel like the dumbest person in the room anymore. And then I also knew that I needed to do something different. And but I think too, like it's just the more there's always gonna be someone better than you, and that's just reality. So if you just never get started, you never put yourself out there, you're never
Right,
gonna
right.
know. Like how are you ever
Yeah,
gonna know?
exactly. I think I love connecting with other nurse entrepreneurs because I feel like it's such a small space. And I learned so much today
It
talking from
is.
you, like the three F's. I'm going to use that from now on,
Three
if
F's,
that's
yeah.
okay. I'm gonna give
Use
you
it
credit, but I'm gonna be like, listen, these are the three F's you need to think about.
with an optional fourth that is not appropriate for
Oh,
children.
we know what the fourth F is. We all
So you can always add that
know.
little point.
Well, we'll put it in the show notes with the fourth F for sure.
Yeah,
But you know
yeah.
what? Is there anything else that you want to add that we maybe not have touched on in this episode, about entrepreneurship, about being a nurse entrepreneur at all?
Yeah, I think if you've used Sarah for your resume building and you've had those soft skills like spread throughout your resume, take those out, see what they are. And if you're interested in entrepreneurship, see what skills, and you can Google search this, what skills would be good for a person who is detail oriented,
Right.
for a person who's a great team player, whatever those soft skills are. Try it and just see what comes up to just get that. That's sometimes what we need is that spark lit to go, okay, I could do that. Another tip is if you're on social media, say you use like Facebook and like your really close friends and family are on Facebook, put a post out there today that just says, if you were to describe me to somebody else, what are the great qualities that I have? And you will be surprised what people say about you. You'll probably cry,
Oh
but
my
it'll
goodness.
also be like, wow, I didn't realize they said that I was good at this, or they think I'm good at this. Because usually what we think we're not good at, we probably really are
That's
good
such a
at.
good idea. I love it because I feel like a lot of nurses are really hard on themselves or
Mhm.
they are humble. And to hear from someone else what they think you're good at is like the ultimate compliment. And if you can take that and kind of internalize it and think about how you can use these skills in a different way, I think that's super impactful. So I just want to thank you so much, Janine, for coming onto the podcast, and let everyone know how they can find you.
Yeah, really simple. So you could either listen to the podcast, The Savvy Scribe, or head on over to savvynursewriter.com. You'll find everything there.
Excellent. So thank you so much for coming on our show. And again, thank you to all those who have listened to the Gritty Nurse podcast. Again, Sarah, I'm going to pass it to you because you
Okay.
always do where people can find us.
So if you're watching our new YouTube channel, make sure that you subscribe, that you follow us. If you're listening to this podcast on Apple, Spotify, Google, iHeartRadio, any of the major platforms, make sure you like and subscribe and leave us a review. If you want to drop us a line, you can go to grittynurse.com, or you can email us at grittynurses@gmail.com.
So thank you so much for listening, and see you next time.